The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, metal groaning under the stress of rapid deceleration. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane pressed his face against the small porthole, watching as an alien world came into view. The planet Karath looked like a bruised jewel against the star field, its surface mottled with purple continents and crimson oceans. Marcus had been unconscious when they captured him 3 days ago during a reconnaissance mission on Europa Station. He'd awakened in chains aboard this vessel, surrounded by creatures that looked like they'd crawled out of humanity's worst nightmares. The Zephyrians stood 9 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons, multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and compound eyes that seemed to catalog every weakness in his human form. The lead captor, who wore elaborate bone decorations across his chest plates, had explained the situation in broken English. Marcus was to be entertainment for the grand arena on Karath, where the galaxy's most feared predators fought to the death for the amusement of the hegemony's elite. Humans were considered a new curiosity, soft mammals from a backwater world that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Your species shows promise in small conflicts. The Zephyrian had clicked in his harsh, insectoid voice. But you lack the natural weapons of true warriors. Still, the crowds enjoy watching the weak struggle before they die. Now, as the ship descended through Karath's atmosphere, Marcus could see the massive arena complex sprawling across what looked like an entire continent. Towers of black metal stretched toward the purple sky, connected by bridges that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Smaller structures clustered around the central Colosseum, like parasites feeding off their host. The landing was rough, jarring Marcus's already bruised ribs. 2 guards hauled him from his cell and marched him down a corridor lined with holding pens. The sounds that emerged from behind the reinforced barriers made his blood run cold. Roars, screams, and wet tearing noises echoed through the metal hallways, accompanied by the scrape of claws against stone and the rhythmic pounding of something massive against its cage. Marcus had seen combat on 6 different worlds, survived 3 tours in the outer colonies, and earned his seal trident through trials that broke lesser men. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer alien hostility of this place. The air itself seemed to vibrate with predatory intent, thick with the scent of blood, and something else, something that spoke to the most primitive part of his brain and screamed danger. They threw him into a preparation chamber that was part armory, part medical bay. A hunched creature with too many joints in its limbs gestured toward a selection of weapons mounted on the walls. Most were clearly designed for non-human anatomy, featuring grips sized for claws or tentacles, weighted for beings with different centers of gravity. But among the alien armaments, Marcus spotted something that made his heart skip a beat. A combat knife, clearly of human manufacture, hung among the exotic weapons like a familiar face in a crowd of strangers. The blade was worn, but well-maintained, its polymer handle scarred by use. Someone else from Earth had been here before him. "Choose your death tool, meat thing," the armorer chittered, its voice like grinding glass. "The arena awaits, and the beasts grow hungry." Marcus reached for the knife, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. The blade was shorter than his preferred K-bar, but it would do. As he examined the weapon, he noticed something etched into the pommel, barely visible scratches that could have been marks to an alien eye. But, to Marcus, they spelled out a message in Morse code: never quit. The preparation chamber's main door iris opened, revealing a tunnel that led toward the arena floor. The sound of the crowd hit him like a physical force, thousands of alien voices raised in anticipation of violence. The chittering, roaring, and electronic screeching blended into a cacophony that seemed to come from all directions at once. Marcus had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. He wasn't just representing himself or his unit now. Somehow, in this alien hellscape, he'd become humanity's ambassador. The way he fought, the way he died, would shape how an entire galaxy viewed his species. The tunnel stretched ahead of him, growing brighter as it approached the arena floor. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow, and the walls were stained with substances he didn't want to identify. Somewhere ahead, war beasts that had conquered a dozen worlds waited to test themselves against Earth's finest. As Marcus walked toward his likely death, he found himself thinking not of home or family, but of the training that had forged him into what he was. The instructors at BUD/S had broken him down and built him back up teaching him that the only easy day was yesterday. They prepared him for underwater demolitions, hostage rescue, and behind enemy lines operations. But they never covered alien gladiatorial combat. Still, the fundamentals remained the same. Assess the threat, identify weaknesses, adapt to the environment, and never give up. The knife in his hand might be small compared to the claws and fangs waiting for him, but Marcus knew that the most dangerous weapon any warrior possessed was his mind. The crowd noise grew deafening as he approached the tunnel's end. Through the final archway, he could see sand stained dark with the blood of previous combats. Towering above the arena floor, alien spectators filled tier upon tier of seating, their excited movements creating a writhing tapestry of scales, chitin, and exotic flesh. Marcus took a deep breath of the recycled air, tasting metal and ozone on his tongue. Whatever happened next, he would face it as a United States Navy SEAL. He would show these aliens what humanity was capable of, even if it killed him. The tunnel ended, opening onto the arena floor like the mouth of a cave. Sand crunched under his boots as he stepped into the alien coliseum, and 10,000 predatory eyes turned to study the small human who dared to walk among giants. The arena was massive, easily 5 times the size of any sports stadium on Earth, with walls that rose hundreds of feet toward the alien sky. But Marcus's attention was immediately drawn to his opposition. Across the arena floor, a gate was rising, revealing the war beast that would serve as his executioner. The creature that emerged defied easy description. It stood 15 feet tall at the shoulder, its body a fusion of organic and mechanical components that spoke of genetic engineering pushed to its absolute limits. 6 legs, ending in claws the size of sword blades, supported a torso that was equal parts muscle and armor plating. The beast's head was perhaps the most terrifying feature of all. Multiple sets of jaws lined with crystalline teeth could apparently operate independently, allowing it to tear prey apart from several angles simultaneously. Optical sensors glowed with malevolent intelligence, tracking Marcus's movement with predatory calculation. This was a Nexarian Ravager, according to the arena announcer whose translated words echoed through the Colosseum. It had killed over 300 sentient beings in various arenas across the galaxy. Its hide bore the ritual scars that marked each victory, creating a tapestry of conquest across its augmented flesh. Marcus gripped his knife tighter, feeling the weight of the galaxy's attention upon him. The betting odds being announced in a dozen alien languages were not encouraging. Apparently, the smart money was on him, lasting less than 30 seconds. The Ravager's optical array focused on him, and Marcus could almost feel the creature's tactical systems analyzing his physiology, cataloging his weaknesses, calculating the most efficient methods of dismemberment. Servos whined as the beast's mechanical components came online, and steam vented from cooling ports along its spine. Around the arena, the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. This was what they had come to see, the moment when predator met prey and the natural order asserted itself. To them, Marcus was nothing more than an exotic appetizer before the main event, a curiosity to be consumed for their entertainment. But as the Ravager began its charge across the arena floor, Marcus felt something unexpected. Not fear, though that was certainly present. Not resignation, though the odds were overwhelming. Instead, he felt a familiar calm settling over him, the same cold focus that had carried him through 100 life-or-death situations. The beast closed the distance between them with terrifying speed, its multiple legs propelling it forward like a living missile. Sand flew from under its claws as it bore down on the small human, jaws already opening to deliver the killing bite. Marcus waited until the last possible second, then dove to his right, rolling across the arena's sand as the Ravager's charge carried it past him. The crowd's roar intensified, though whether in approval or disappointment, he couldn't tell. The beast pivoted with mechanical precision, its augmented reflexes allowing it to correct course far faster than any purely organic creature could manage. But Marcus had already moved again, using his smaller size and human agility to stay just ahead of the killing jaws. This was survival, pure and simple, not the choreographed violence of action movies or the sanitized combat of training exercises, but the raw, desperate struggle between predator and prey. Marcus had trained for it, lived it, and somehow survived it more times than he cared to count. The Ravager's next attack came faster, its learning algorithms adapting to Marcus's movement patterns. Claws raked across his back, tearing through his uniform and opening parallel cuts in his flesh. The pain was immediate and sharp, but Marcus used it, let it focus his mind and sharpen his reflexes. He spun inside the beast's guard, driving his knife toward what looked like a vulnerable joint where organic tissue met mechanical augmentation. The blade bit deep, finding something vital, and the Ravager's roar shook the entire arena. For a moment, man and monster were locked together, Marcus hanging from the knife handle while the beast thrashed in pain and fury. Then, massive claws swept him aside, sending him tumbling across the blood-stained sand. Marcus rolled to his feet, noting that the beast's left forelimb was now moving differently, its servo responses clearly damaged. First blood to the human, though the cuts across his back reminded him that the score was far from settled. The crowd had gone strangely quiet, their excitement replaced by something that might have been surprise. Apparently, none of them had expected the soft human to actually wound their champion. Marcus wiped blood from his eyes and prepared for the next exchange, his knife ready in his hand. The Ravager was studying him now with something approaching respect, its tactical systems recalculating the threat assessment. This would be more than a simple execution after all. Around them, the alien Colosseum waited to see what would happen when Earth's warriors met the galaxy's finest predators. Marcus Kane, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs, adjusted his grip on his knife and prepared to show them exactly what humanity was made of. The Nexarian Ravager circled Marcus with predatory patience, its damaged forelimb sparking occasionally as damaged circuits struggled to compensate for the knife wound. The beast's multiple optical arrays tracked every micro-movement, learning from their first exchange. Steam continued to vent from its cooling ports, the mechanical components working harder now to maintain peak performance. Marcus kept his breathing steady, falling back on the combat meditation techniques that had served him in countless firefights. The pain from the claw marks across his back was sharp but manageable, and the adrenaline flooding his system sharpened rather than clouded his focus. He'd been hurt worse during Hell Week and kept going. The crowd's murmur had shifted in tone, thousands of alien voices discussing this unexpected development. Through the arena's translation system, fragments of conversation filtered down to the fighting floor. Words like impossible and unprecedented seemed to feature prominently in several different languages. In the VIP section high above, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement behind reinforced transparisteel viewing panels. The arena's elite patrons were leaning forward in their seats, their casual indifference replaced by genuine interest. Whatever they'd expected from tonight's entertainment, the soft human actually wounding their champion hadn't been part of the program. The Ravager's attack came without warning, its combat algorithms having identified what they calculated as the optimal striking pattern. Two of its functional limbs swept in from different angles, while its primary head lunged forward, attempting to trap Marcus between multiple threats simultaneously. But Marcus had fought enemies with similar tactics before. Insurgents in the outer colonies had often used coordinated attacks with multiple combatants. The principle was the same whether dealing with 3 human terrorists or 1 multi-limbed war beast. Create space, eliminate threats sequentially, never allow yourself to be surrounded. He dropped into a combat role that carried him under the Ravager's primary attack, came up beside the beast's damaged leg, and drove his knife deep into what appeared to be a hydraulic coupling. Synthetic fluid sprayed across the arena's sand as the leg's movement became even more erratic. The creature's roar of pain and frustration shook dust from the arena walls. It spun faster than Marcus anticipated, and a backhand blow from one of its undamaged limbs caught him across the chest, lifting him off his feet and sending him sprawling. Marcus hit the sand hard, the impact driving air from his lungs. For a moment, his vision grayed around the edges, and he could taste blood in his mouth. The knife had been jarred from his grip during the impact, and he could see it lying in the sand several feet away. The Ravager sensed victory and pressed its advantage, charging forward with murderous intent. But Marcus had been thrown harder during seer training, and muscle memory kicked in before conscious thought could interfere. He rolled aside as massive claws cratered the sand where he'd been lying, lunged for his weapon, and came up in a defensive crouch just as the beast's jaws snapped shut inches from his head. The crowd was on its feet now, their various alien physiologies creating a cacophony of excitement. Some were chittering in rapid bursts that might have been applause, while others released pheromones that filled the arena with the scent of electric anticipation. This was no longer the casual slaughter they'd expected, but a genuine contest between predators. Marcus could feel fatigue beginning to creep into his muscles. The Ravager, despite its damage, showed no signs of tiring. Its mechanical components were designed for extended combat operations, and its organic parts had been engineered for endurance far beyond anything natural selection could produce. But humans had something that genetic engineering couldn't replicate, something that the galaxy's greatest military minds had consistently underestimated. They had the ability to adapt, to find solutions where none should exist, to turn disadvantages into strengths through sheer bloody-minded determination. Marcus began to change his tactics, moving from purely defensive maneuvering to something more aggressive. Instead of simply avoiding the Ravager's attacks, he started using its own momentum against it, guiding its charges into the arena walls or causing it to overextend itself in ways that exposed new vulnerabilities. When the beast lunged for his throat, Marcus didn't just dodge. He grabbed onto the creature's head mounting and used its own forward motion to swing himself up onto its back. For a few precious seconds, he was outside the range of its claws and secondary heads, position where he could access the cooling vents that regulated its internal temperature. His knife found the intake grills, severing key connections and blocking airflow channels. Almost immediately, warning lights began flashing along the Ravager's mechanical components as its core temperature started to rise beyond safe parameters. The beast tried to dislodge him, bucking and twisting like a mechanical bronco, but Marcus held on with the grip strength that came from a lifetime of rope climbing and fast roping operations. His hands were slick with his own blood and various fluids leaking from the creature's damaged systems, but he maintained his hold and continued his systematic sabotage of the beast's cooling network. Heat began radiating from the Ravager's mechanical components as its thermal regulation systems failed. The creature's movements became more erratic, its combat algorithms struggling to compensate for the rising temperatures that were affecting processor efficiency. Finally, a particularly violent twist threw Marcus clear, sending him tumbling across the arena floor. He came up running, putting distance between himself and the increasingly unstable war beast. Behind him, the Ravager had begun to emit a high-pitched whine as its systems strained against thermal overload. The crowd's excitement had reached a fever pitch. In the VIP sections, beings that had witnessed thousands of arena combats were standing and gesturing wildly at the impossible scene playing out below. The soft human wasn't just surviving against their champion, he was systematically dismantling it. But the Ravager wasn't finished yet. Its backup cooling systems kicked in, bringing core temperatures back within acceptable parameters. The brief thermal overload had damaged some of its more sophisticated functions, but its basic combat capabilities remained intact. If anything, the loss of higher processing power had made it more dangerous, reducing it to a state of pure predatory instinct. The beast charged again, but this time Marcus was ready. He'd been studying its movement patterns, cataloging the slight delay between its organic and mechanical systems, noting how the damaged leg affected its balance. All of that information crystallized into a plan that would have been called insane by any reasonable tactical assessment. As the Ravager bore down on him, Marcus didn't dodge. Instead, he ran straight at it, diving beneath its primary head at the last possible moment and coming up inside its guard. Before the creature could react, he'd wrapped his arms around one of its undamaged forelegs and locked his legs around it in a position that any wrestler would recognize. The beast thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge him, but Marcus had positioned himself where its other limbs couldn't reach him effectively. More importantly, he was close enough to one of the major power coupling that fed the leg's mechanical systems. His knife found the coupling's weak point, slicing through armored conduits with surgical precision. Sparks flew as the leg's power supply was severed, and the limb went dead, no longer responding to the creature's commands. Now the Ravager was truly crippled, forced to rely on its remaining functional limbs while carrying the dead weight of its damaged components. Its movements became awkward, unbalanced, as its combat systems struggled to compensate for the asymmetrical damage. Marcus released his hold and rolled away as the beast stumbled, its damaged anatomy finally betraying it. The creature that had dominated arena combat across the galaxy was learning what human military strategists had known for centuries. Mechanical superiority meant nothing if your opponent could exploit your weaknesses. The Nexarian Ravager tried to stabilize itself, servos whining as its remaining systems redistributed power and recalculated movement algorithms. But the damage was too extensive. One of its optical arrays had been damaged in the fall, leaving a blind spot that Marcus was quick to exploit. He moved through that blind spot like a shadow, coming up behind the beast while it was still struggling to regain its footing. This time, when his knife found its target, it was the main neural interface that connected the creature's organic brain to its mechanical components. The Ravager went rigid as the connection was severed, its mechanical parts freezing in place while its organic components continued to function. For a moment, it was trapped between two different physiologies that could no longer communicate with each other. Then, the beast began to collapse, systems shutting down in cascade failure as backup protocols engaged to prevent further damage. The arena's greatest champion was falling to its knees in the bloodstained sand, defeated by a single human with nothing but a knife and the training that had made him one of Earth's elite warriors. The crowd had gone completely silent, thousands of predatory minds trying to process what they just witnessed. In the VIP sections, alien dignitaries sat in stunned silence, their assumptions about human combat capability crumbling like ancient stone. Marcus stood over the fallen Ravager, breathing hard but victorious. Blood ran from his wounds, and his uniform hung in tatters, but he was alive. More than that, he had proven that humanity deserved a place in the galaxy's warrior culture. But as the arena's medical teams moved to tend to the fallen champion, Marcus realized that his victory had created a problem as much as solved one. The crowd's silence was being replaced by something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up despite his exhaustion. Respect. These aliens understood strength, respected prowess in combat above all other virtues. By defeating their champion, Marcus had earned something far more dangerous than their contempt. He had earned their attention. High above in the arena's command center, figures were already moving, making decisions that would ripple across the galaxy. The human had proven himself worthy of greater challenges, more dangerous opponents. The entertainment value of watching him fight had just increased exponentially. Marcus wiped his knife clean and looked up at the VIP sections, meeting the alien gazes that studied him with new interest. He had survived his first trial by combat, but something told him that this was just the beginning of a much longer and deadlier journey. Around the arena, gates were opening that hadn't been used in years, revealing holding areas for creatures so dangerous that they were only unleashed for the most special occasions. The crowd's excited murmur was building again, this time with a different quality, an anticipation of violence that transcended species barriers. Marcus Kane, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs, had entered the arena as an unknown quantity, a curiosity to be consumed for alien entertainment. But he was leaving this first battle as something far more dangerous to the established order. He was leaving as a legend. The holding cell they assigned Marcus after his victory over the Nexarian Ravager was considerably more comfortable than his previous accommodation. Instead of bare metal and chains, he found himself in a space that was clearly designed for valued gladiators. The walls were smooth stone, and actual furniture had been provided, including a sleeping platform with what passed for bedding among the various alien species. More importantly, they'd allowed him to keep his knife. Marcus sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, methodically cleaning and inspecting his weapon while his mind processed the events in the arena. The cuts across his back had been treated by an alien medical drone that sealed the wounds with some kind of bioadhesive foam. The process had been painless, but deeply unsettling, watching mechanical appendages move across his skin with inhuman precision. Through the cell's single window, he could see other sections of the gladiator complex. Figures moved through corridors and training areas, some humanoid, others so alien that Marcus couldn't immediately determine which end was the head. The diversity was staggering, representing dozens of different species and physiological configurations. But what struck him most was their behavior. These weren't the casual movements of prisoners or the dejected shuffling of the condemned. These beings moved with purpose, with the confident stride of professional warriors. Whatever else this place was, it was also a kind of military academy for the galaxy's most dangerous individuals. A soft chime announced the arrival of a visitor. The cell's force field shimmered and deactivated, allowing a tall, slim figure to enter. Marcus recognized the species, though he'd never seen one up close before. Ethereal was the word that came to mind, though he knew that diplomatic briefings had used more technical terminology. The being stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale, translucent skin that revealed the complex network of organs beneath. Forearms moved with fluid grace, each ending in delicate hands that possessed an extra joint in each finger. The head was elongated, dominated by large, silver eyes that seemed to contain depths beyond measurement. "I am HFY," the being said, its voice a melodious whisper that somehow carried clearly despite its softness. "I serve as counselor to new arrivals who show promise." Marcus remained seated, keeping his knife within easy reach while studying his visitor. Everything about the alien screamed potential threat, from its unusual height advantage to the way it moved with predatory grace despite its delicate appearance. "Counselor," Marcus repeated. "Let me guess. You're here to explain how things work around here. Maybe recruit me for some kind of gladiator program." HFY's expression was impossible to read, but something that might have been amusement flickered across its features. "Your species possesses unexpected directness." "Yes, that is essentially correct. Your performance against the Ravager has created opportunities." The alien moved closer, and Marcus noticed that each of its 4 hands bore intricate scarring that looked deliberately applied. Ritual markings, perhaps, or indicators of rank within whatever hierarchy govern this place. "The arena serves multiple purposes," HFY continued. "Entertainment for the masses, yes, but also assessment and recruitment for more specialized roles. The hegemony requires warriors capable of operations that conventional military forces cannot accomplish." "Black Ops," Marcus said, understanding immediately. "Your talent scouts for some kind of special forces unit." A crude but accurate analogy. The Umbral Corps operates in situations where plausible deniability and expendable personnel are required. Suicide missions, in your terminology. The survival rate is approximately 12%. Marcus studied the alien's scarred hands again, noting the way they moved with practiced precision even during casual conversation. "But the benefits are good, I'm guessing. For those who survive long enough to enjoy them, yes. Freedom, wealth, the right to bear arms, and travel freely throughout hegemony space. Most importantly, the protection of the core itself. No one casually threatens an Umbral operative." It was a recruitment pitch, Marcus realized, though probably unlike any other in the galaxy. Most military organizations promised glory, honor, or the chance to serve a greater cause. The Umbral Corps apparently cut straight to the practical benefits of membership. "What's the alternative?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Continued arena combat until you are killed for the entertainment of the masses. Your victory over the Ravager was impressive, but each subsequent opponent will be chosen specifically to counter your demonstrated capabilities. The arena masters are quite creative in their selections." Marcus looked out the window again, watching the alien warriors move through their routines. Some were sparring with weapons he couldn't identify, while others practiced what looked like hand-to-hand combat techniques adapted for non-human anatomy. It was clearly a professional operation, not just a prison for gladiators. "How long do I have to decide?" "Your next arena appearance is scheduled for tomorrow's evening entertainment. The opponent has already been selected based on analysis of your combat performance. I am told it will provide quite a spectacle." HFY moved toward the cell entrance, then paused as if remembering something important. "There is one additional factor you should consider. Your species is new to the galactic community, largely unknown and underestimated. The intelligence value of having a human operative working for the Corps would be substantial." The alien departed, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the implications of the offer. Outside his window, the alien warriors continued their training, and somewhere in the depths of the complex, arena masters were preparing tomorrow's entertainment. Marcus had faced difficult decisions before, but this was different. It wasn't just about his own survival anymore. Whatever choice he made would affect how the rest of the galaxy viewed humanity. If he joined the Umbral Corps, he'd be trading his freedom for a chance to gather intelligence about galactic politics and military capabilities. If he refused, he'd likely die in the arena, but his death might send a different kind of message about human determination. He was still considering his options when the evening meal arrived, delivered by a small, automated cart that navigated the corridors with mechanical precision. The food was clearly designed for a variety of different metabolisms, and Marcus found several items that were not only edible, but actually quite good. As he ate, he became aware that he was being watched. Not directly, but through the various sensors and monitoring systems that undoubtedly filled the complex. His every action was being recorded, analyzed, and probably compared to baseline behavioral patterns for his species. It was a familiar feeling. During his time in the SEALs, Marcus had grown accustomed to operating under constant observation, whether from enemy surveillance or friendly intelligence gathering. The key was to remember that being watched didn't necessarily mean being controlled. After the meal, he began a systematic inspection of his cell, looking for anything that might be useful in an escape attempt or simply to satisfy his professional curiosity about alien security measures. The walls were solid, the window was reinforced beyond anything he could break with bare hands, and the force field generator was embedded too deeply in the wall to access. But the inspection revealed something interesting. The cell's environmental systems were controlled by a central hub that was accessible through a maintenance panel near the ceiling. It wasn't an escape route, but it represented a potential vulnerability in the complex's infrastructure. Marcus filed that information away and settled down to wait for tomorrow's challenges. Whatever happened in the next arena fight, he was beginning to form the outline of a longer-term strategy. The aliens thought they understood him based on one combat performance, but they'd never dealt with someone trained in long-term survival and resistance operations. As the complex settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus began his own preparations. He started with a mental inventory of everything he'd observed since his capture, organizing the information according to standard intelligence gathering protocols. Guard rotations, facility layout, personnel types, security measures, potential weapons, possible allies. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that because he was primitive by their standards, he would think like a primitive warrior focused only on immediate survival. But Marcus had been trained to think strategically, to see beyond the current battle to the war that lay beyond it. Tomorrow's arena fight would be important, not just for his survival, but for the intelligence he could gather about his opponents and the arena's operation. Every detail would be useful if he ever found a way to escape and report back to Earth's military command. But first, he had to survive whatever monster they'd chosen to face him next. As the complex's lighting dimmed to simulate night, Marcus began a series of stretching and meditation exercises designed to prepare both his body and mind for combat. The wounds on his back were healing faster than they should have, probably thanks to whatever the medical drone had used to treat them, but he was still operating at less than full capacity. His knife lay within easy reach, cleaned, and ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The weapon had served him well against the Ravager, but Marcus knew that his next opponent would be chosen specifically to counter his demonstrated abilities. The arena masters weren't interested in fair fights. They wanted spectacle, and that meant escalating challenges designed to eventually overwhelm any competitor. Outside his window, the alien warriors had retired to their own quarters, but Marcus could still hear the sounds of the complex settling into its nighttime routine. Mechanical hums, distant conversations in languages he couldn't understand, and the occasional roar or screech from the deeper levels where the arena's most dangerous creatures were housed. Somewhere in that maze of corridors and holding pens, tomorrow's opponent was waiting. Marcus tried to imagine what kind of creature the arena masters would choose to face him. Something faster than the Ravager, probably, to counter his mobility advantage. Or perhaps something with natural armor that would resist knife attacks. Whatever it was, Marcus would face it the same way he'd faced every challenge in his military career. With careful planning, professional skill, and the absolute refusal to surrender that had carried him through Hell Week and into the ranks of the world's most elite warriors. He'd entered the arena as entertainment for alien crowds, but he was beginning to realize that he might leave it as something far more dangerous. Not just a survivor, but a strategic asset in humanity's first contact with a hostile galaxy. The thought brought a grim smile to his face as he settled down to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Marcus Kane was exactly where a Navy SEAL was supposed to be, behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, and preparing to accomplish the impossible. The morning brought Marcus his first real look at the gladiatorial complex during active hours. Through his window, He watched as dozens of alien warriors moved through training routines that varied wildly based on their species' natural advantages. A group of reptilian beings practiced coordinated attacks that emphasized their natural camouflage abilities, while a lone creature that looked like a cross between a gorilla and a mantis worked through forms that showcased its incredible reach and speed. But what caught Marcus's attention was a smaller figure moving through the courtyard below. Humanoid, but clearly not human, with features that suggested some kind of feline heritage. The being moved with a fluid grace that spoke of advanced combat training, and Marcus noted the way other gladiators gave it respectful space during its exercises. The mystery solved itself when HFY returned, accompanied by the feline warrior Marcus had been observing. "I thought you might benefit from meeting Kresta before your next combat," the ethereal said as the force field deactivated. "She has survived 17 arena matches and for Umbral Core missions." The feline warrior studied Marcus with golden eyes that missed nothing. She stood about 6 feet tall, with a lean build that emphasized speed and agility over raw strength. Her skin was covered in a fine pattern of spots that seemed to shift and change as Marcus watched, some kind of adaptive camouflage system that operated below the conscious level. "So you are the human who defeated the Ravager," Kresta said, her voice carrying a slight purring quality that would have been pleasant in other circumstances. "Impressive. Most first-time arena fighters last less than 5 minutes against a top-tier opponent." Marcus kept his expression neutral, unsure whether he was meeting a potential ally or being sized up by another predator. In his experience, the two categories often overlapped. "I had good training," he said simply. "Yes, I watched the recordings. Your technique is crude but effective, and your tactical thinking shows promise. Tell me, what do you know about your opponent for tonight's match?" Marcus glanced at HFY, who remained silent but attentive. This felt like some kind of test, though he wasn't sure what the correct answer might be. "Nothing specific," he admitted, "but I'm assuming it'll be something chosen specifically to counter my previous performance. Faster than the Ravager, probably, with natural armor or ranged capabilities." Kresta's spots shifted in what might have been approval. "Close. Your opponent will be a Void Stalker, transported here at considerable expense from the Andromeda frontier. It possesses selective phase-shifting abilities that allow it to become temporarily incorporeal, passing through solid matter at will." The implications hit Marcus immediately. A knife was useless against an enemy that could turn intangible whenever it chose. But every advantage came with limitations, and he learned long ago that the key to defeating superior opponents was finding those limitations and exploiting them ruthlessly. "Phase shifting requires energy," he said, thinking out loud. "Has to have some kind of cooldown period or duration limit. And when it phases, it probably can't affect the physical world either. That creates windows of opportunity." "Very good," Kresta said, her spots shifting again. "The Stalker can maintain phase shift for approximately 30 seconds at a time, with a minimum 20-second recovery period between uses. During phase state, it cannot physically interact with matter, which means no attacks, but also no way to change direction or momentum." It was intelligence he wouldn't have expected an enemy to provide, and Marcus studied the feline warrior more carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the arena serves multiple purposes," HFY interjected smoothly. "Entertainment, yes, but also assessment and training. Your survival benefits several different agendas." Kresta nodded agreement. "The Umbral Core needs operatives who can think tactically under pressure. Dead recruits are of little use to anyone. Consider this a final examination before recruitment." Marcus was beginning to understand the complex politics that governed this place. It wasn't just about gladiatorial combat for entertainment value. The arena was a recruitment and training ground for the galaxy's most dangerous special operations unit, and his performance was being evaluated by criteria far more sophisticated than simple survival. "What else can you tell me about Void Stalkers?" "Predators from a dimension that exists slightly out of phase with normal space," Kresta explained. "They hunt by stalking prey across dimensional boundaries, striking when their targets are most vulnerable. Natural weapons include retractable claws that can extend to nearly 3 feet in length, and a neurotoxin delivered through bite or claw wounds. Weaknesses: phase shifting requires precise timing and concentration. Disrupt either, and the ability becomes unreliable. Also, they're adapted for hunting single targets in complex terrain. Open spaces with nowhere to hide make them nervous. Marcus nodded, already beginning to formulate a battle plan. The arena's open design would work in his favor, forcing the stalker to rely on its phase abilities rather than traditional predator tactics. The key would be timing his attacks to coincide with the creature's vulnerable periods. One more thing, Cresta added as they prepare to leave. Void stalkers are intelligent. This isn't a mindless beast like the Ravager. It will adapt to your tactics and try to psychologically manipulate you during combat. Don't listen to anything it says. After they left, Marcus spent the remaining hours before his match in preparation. Physical conditioning, mental rehearsal of tactical scenarios, and careful maintenance of his equipment. The knife that had served him so well against the Ravager would be less useful against an opponent that could turn intangible, but it was still his only reliable weapon. He also spent time thinking about the larger situation. The Umbral Corps recruitment offer was beginning to look more attractive, not because he wanted to work for alien overlords, but because it would give him access to intelligence about galactic politics and military capabilities. Information that Earth's military desperately needed. But first, he had to survive tonight's match. The preparation chamber before his second arena appearance was different this time. Instead of the crude armory he'd encountered before, Marcus found himself in a space that resembled a high-tech briefing room. Holographic displays showed tactical information about his opponent, including anatomical data and combat footage from previous matches. The Void Stalker was even more disturbing than Cresta's description had suggested. It stood roughly human height, but was built like a nightmare fusion of spider and shadow. 8 limbs ended in those retractable claws she'd mentioned, and its head was a featureless oval that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most unsettling were the recordings of its phase-shifting ability. One moment it would be solid matter. The next it would become a barely visible outline that passed through walls and weapons with equal ease. The tactical implications were staggering. But Marcus had faced impossible odds before, and the key to victory was often found in understanding why those odds seemed impossible in the first place. The Void Stalker's abilities were impressive, but they came with limitations that could be exploited by an opponent who understood them. When the arena doors opened and Marcus stepped onto the sand for the second time, he was greeted by a crowd that was noticeably more excited than during his first match. Word of his victory over the Ravager had spread, and the betting odds reflected genuine uncertainty about the outcome. The Stalker materialized in the center of the arena without warning, simply fading into existence as if it had been there all along. Its eyeless head turned toward Marcus with predatory focus, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once. "Another soft meat thing comes to die," it said, the words carrying overtones that made Marcus's skin crawl. "I have tasted the fear of 1,000 worlds. Your terror will be particularly sweet." Marcus ignored the psychological warfare, focusing instead on the creature's positioning and movement patterns. It was circling him at precisely the range where its claws could reach him in a single lunge, testing his reactions and looking for signs of fear or hesitation. The first attack came without warning, all 8 limbs striking simultaneously in a coordinated assault that should have overwhelmed any human defense. But Marcus had been expecting it, and he threw himself sideways in a rolling dive that carried him clear of the killing blow. The Stalker's claws gouged deep furrows in the arena sand where he'd been standing, and Marcus noted that the creature had committed fully to the attack. No held reserves, no contingency planning. It was used to overwhelming its prey with superior numbers of attacks, not dealing with opponents who could avoid them entirely. "Interesting," the Stalker hissed, already repositioning for another assault. "The meat thing has been trained. This will be more enjoyable than anticipated." Marcus came to his feet with his knife ready, but he was already moving again before the creature could lock onto his position. The key was constant motion, never allowing the Stalker to predict where he would be when its attacks landed. The second assault came faster, and this time the creature tried to compensate for Marcus's mobility by spreading its attacks across a wider area. But Marcus had fought opponents who used similar tactics, and he responded by going vertical instead of horizontal, diving over the creature's attacks rather than around them. His knife found one of the Stalker's limbs as he passed overhead, opening a cut that leaked something that might have been blood or might have been dimensional energy. The creature's shriek of pain and surprise echoed through the arena, and Marcus noted that whatever its otherworldly origins, it could still be hurt by conventional weapons. The stalker phased immediately after taking the hit, becoming translucent and incorporeal. Marcus lost visual contact as the creature faded from normal space, but he counted seconds in his head, tracking the duration of its phase state. 25 seconds later, it materialized behind him, claws extended for a killing blow to the spine. But Marcus had been expecting that too, and he spun away from the attack while driving his knife toward where the creature's center of mass should be. The blade passed harmlessly through empty air as the stalker phased again, but Marcus noted the timing. The creature's phase shifts were becoming more frequent and shorter in duration, suggesting that the ability was taxing its resources faster than anticipated. Clever meat thing, the stalker admitted, its voice carrying a note of grudging respect. But cleverness will not save you when I've learned all your tricks. Marcus didn't respond to the taunt, focusing instead on the tactical situation. The creature was intelligent enough to adapt its strategy, but it was also growing frustrated with his ability to avoid its attacks. Frustration led to mistakes, and mistakes led to opportunities. The next exchange proved his theory correct. The stalker's attack pattern became more aggressive, but less coordinated, its psychological manipulation giving way to simple predatory fury. When it materialized for what should have been a killing blow, Marcus was ready. Instead of dodging away from the attack, he moved into it, accepting a shallow cut across his shoulder in exchange for getting inside the creature's reach. At close range, the stalker's multiple limbs became a disadvantage rather than an asset, interfering with each other as they tried to target an opponent who was too close to hit effectively. Marcus's knife found the creature's throat, or what passed for one, and the stalker's alien shriek of pain drove the arena crowd to new heights of excitement. When it tried to phase away from the attack, Marcus held on, allowing the creature's incorporeal state to carry him along into whatever dimensional space it occupied during its shifts. The sensation was indescribable, like falling through ice water while being struck by lightning. For a moment that lasted either seconds or centuries, Marcus existed in a space that human senses weren't designed to process. He could see the arena around them as ghostly outlines, could feel the stalker's growing panic as it realized that its ultimate defense had been turned against it. When they materialized back in normal space, both combatants hit the arena sand hard. But Marcus recovered first, his SEAL training in underwater operations having prepared him for disorientation and oxygen deprivation better than the stalker's instincts could handle. His knife found its target again before the creature could fully recover, and this time the wound was deep enough to matter. The stalker tried to phase one final time, but its concentration was broken, and it flickered between states like a malfunctioning hologram before solidifying permanently. Marcus stepped back as the creature collapsed, its otherworldly shriek fading to silence. Around them, the arena crowd erupted in approval, their various forms of applause creating a cacophony that seemed to shake the very structure of the Colosseum. But Marcus was looking up at the VIP sections, where figures in elaborate robes were leaning forward in their seats with expressions that ranged from surprise to genuine concern. He'd just defeated two of their champion fighters in as many days, using nothing but human training and determination. The implications were starting to worry them, and that worried Marcus in return. Success in the arena was drawing the kind of attention that could lead to far more dangerous challenges than anything he'd faced so far. As the medical teams moved to tend to his wounds and remove the stalker's body, Marcus caught sight of Cresta in one of the gladiator viewing areas. The feline warrior was studying him with an expression that might have been approval, but her spots were shifting in patterns that suggested complex emotions he couldn't interpret. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew that his time as simple arena entertainment was coming to an end. The question was whether what replaced it would be better or worse for his long-term survival prospects. The third day brought changes that Marcus could sense even before anyone spoke to him. The guards who escorted him to the preparation chamber moved with a different kind of respect, their posture suggesting wariness rather than casual dismissal. When alien warriors of a dozen different species stepped aside to let him pass, Marcus knew that his status in the complex hierarchy had shifted dramatically. The preparation chamber itself had been upgraded again. Instead of tactical displays showing information about a single opponent, Marcus found himself surrounded by holographic projections that mapped out an entirely different kind of challenge. multiple opponents, complex terrain, and objectives that went far beyond simple survival. Zexai was waiting for him, but the ethereal was no longer alone. Beside him stood a figure that radiated authority, even while remaining perfectly still. The being appeared to be reptilian in nature, with scales that shifted between different shades of green and gold, depending on the angle of observation. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute command. "I am War Master Sithor," the reptilian said without preamble. "I oversee combat operations for the Umbral Corps throughout this sector of the galaxy." Marcus remained standing, maintaining the respectful attention he would show to a senior officer while studying the alien for any signs of threat or weakness. The creature's scales were clearly some form of natural armor, and the way it held itself suggested training in combat disciplines that predated human civilization. "Your performance in the arena has exceeded all expectations," SK Thor continued. "2 victories against top-tier opponents, using nothing but primitive weapons and tactical thinking. Most impressive. But tonight's challenge will be different." The holographic displays around them shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of what appeared to be a complex urban environment. Buildings, streets, and underground tunnels created a maze that extended both horizontally and vertically through multiple levels. Tonight you face not a single opponent, but a scenario. Hostage rescue in a hostile urban environment, with multiple enemy combatants and civilian casualties to consider. Success requires not just combat ability, but tactical thinking, threat assessment, and precise execution under extreme time pressure. Marcus studied the terrain map, noting choke points, sight lines, and potential extraction routes with the practiced eye of someone who'd planned real-world hostage rescue operations. The scenario looked challenging, but manageable, assuming he had proper intelligence about enemy capabilities and civilian locations. "What's the catch?" he asked, knowing there had to be one. SEK Thor's scales shifted to what might have been an approving color. "The catch is that failure results in actual civilian deaths. The hostages are real, volunteers from various species who have agreed to participate in exchange for debt forgiveness or other considerations. They will die if you fail to extract them within the time limit." It was psychological warfare on a level Marcus had never encountered before. Not just his own life at stake, but the lives of innocents who had been placed in harm's way for the entertainment of alien crowds. The arena masters were testing more than his combat ability now. They were testing his moral character under pressure. How many hostages? 7, held in 3 different locations throughout the scenario area. You have 45 minutes to locate and extract all of them while neutralizing hostile forces. The enemy will consist of 12 trained combatants from various military backgrounds. Marcus continued studying the holographic map, his mind automatically running through tactical possibilities. Multiple objectives, unknown enemy positions, civilian lives at stake. It was exactly the kind of scenario that SEAL training was designed to handle, but the time pressure would make it extremely challenging. "What equipment do I get?" "Standard Umbral Core loadout for urban operations," Zexai said, gesturing toward a wall display that had previously been hidden. "Modular combat system adaptable to various species' physiologies, advanced optical equipment, and limited explosive capabilities." The weapons displayed were clearly designed for multi-species use, with adjustable grips and modular components that could be configured for different types of hands and combat styles. Most interesting was what appeared to be some form of energy weapon, sleek and compact, but obviously more sophisticated than anything in Earth's current arsenal. "This is a recruitment test," Marcus said, understanding the situation completely now. "Win, and I get offered a position with the Umbral Corps. Lose, and the civilians die along with me." "Precisely," SEK Thor confirmed. "The Corps requires operatives who can function effectively under moral pressure as well as physical threat. Many warriors can kill when their own lives are at stake. Far fewer can maintain tactical clarity when innocent lives hang in the balance." Marcus began strapping on the alien equipment, testing the weapon's balance, and familiarizing himself with its basic operation. The targeting system interfaced directly with his optical nerves through some kind of neural link, creating a heads-up display that reminded him of advanced pilot helmets he'd used during joint operations with Navy aviators. The energy weapon felt substantial in his hands, with a weight distribution that suggested serious stopping power. The modular design allowed him to attach various accessories, including what appeared to be a suppressor system and an underbarrel component that is neural interface identified as a non-lethal stunning device. One final consideration, SEK Thor said as Marcus completed his equipment check. The enemy forces have been told that this is a standard gladiatorial match with no special rules or objectives. They believe their goal is simply to kill you within the time limit. The presence of civilians is unknown to them. It added another layer of complexity to an already challenging scenario. The enemy combatants weren't just obstacles to overcome, but potentially useful sources of information if Marcus could capture rather than kill them. And their lack of knowledge about the civilians meant they might inadvertently help him by providing intelligence about the scenario area's layout and security measures. Any questions before deployment? Marcus considered the tactical situation one final time, running through contingency plans and fallback positions. 45 minutes to rescue 7 hostages while neutralizing 12 trained enemies in an unknown urban environment. It was ambitious even by SEAL standards, but it was also exactly the kind of mission he'd trained for his entire adult life. Just one, he said. If I succeed, what happens to the hostages after extraction? Are they really free, or do they just get recycled into another scenario? SEK Thor's scales shifted again, this time to what Marcus interpreted as genuine surprise. An interesting question. Most applicants are too focused on their own survival to consider the long-term welfare of civilians. The hostages will be released as promised, with full debt forgiveness and safe passage to whatever destination they choose. It was probably the truth, Marcus decided. An organization sophisticated enough to run recruitment scenarios like this would understand the importance of keeping their word to volunteers. Trust was a strategic resource that couldn't be rebuilt once lost. The deployment chamber was a marvel of alien engineering, using some form of matter transportation technology to insert Marcus directly into the scenario area. One moment he was standing in the preparation chamber, the next he was crouched in a shadowy alley between 2 towering structures that looked like a fusion of organic growth and mechanical construction. His neural interface immediately began feeding him tactical information, marking potential threats and identifying possible routes through the urban maze. The energy weapon in his hands felt solid and reassuring, its targeting system already synchronized with his movements and providing range data for potential targets. Marcus spent his first 30 seconds in careful observation, studying the environment and listening for any signs of enemy activity or civilian distress. The scenario area was larger than the holographic display had suggested, with multiple levels of complexity that would challenge his navigation skills as much as his combat abilities. The first hostage location was 3 blocks away, according to his tactical display. Marcus began moving through the alien urban environment with a fluid stealth that had carried him through a dozen real-world combat zones. The buildings provided excellent cover and concealment opportunities, but they also created numerous potential ambush sites that required constant vigilance. He found the first enemy patrol 2 blocks into his approach, 3 alien warriors positioned to cover a major intersection. Their equipment was impressive, clearly military-grade, and their positioning showed tactical training that rivaled anything Marcus had encountered on human battlefields. But they were focused on watching for frontal approaches, and Marcus had learned long ago that the best way to defeat superior numbers was to avoid fighting them on their terms. Instead of engaging the patrol directly, he used the building's vertical architecture to bypass them entirely, moving through upper-level access ways that brought him behind their position. The first hostage was exactly where his tactical display had indicated, secured in what appeared to be a small commercial structure that might have been a store or restaurant in normal circumstances. 2 guards, both armed with energy weapons similar to his own, maintained a loose perimeter while a third worked on some kind of technical equipment near the civilian. Marcus's approach was textbook special operations, using concealment and timing to neutralize the guards before they could raise an alarm. The energy weapon's stunning setting proved remarkably effective, dropping both perimeter guard without the noise that would have alerted other enemy forces in the area. The technical specialist was more challenging, positioned where he could see both the hostage and the most likely approach routes. But Marcus's training included scenarios involving both hostage rescue and electronic surveillance, and he recognized the equipment as some form of monitoring system designed to detect rescue attempts. A thrown piece of debris created the distraction he needed, drawing the specialist's attention away from the hostage long enough for Marcus to close the distance and neutralized the threat. The civilian, a small humanoid with large eyes and delicate features, looked terrified but unharmed. "I'm here to get you out," Marcus said, hoping the translation system would convey reassurance along with his words. "Stay close and do exactly what I tell you." The first extraction went smoothly, with Marcus using predetermined routes to move the civilian to a secure location while avoiding known enemy positions. But as he began his approach to the second hostage location, his tactical display updated with disturbing information. The enemy forces were beginning to adapt to his presence, shifting their patrol patterns and consolidating around the remaining hostage locations. What had started as a straightforward rescue operation was evolving into a more complex tactical puzzle that required constant adaptation and improvisation. The second hostage site was more heavily defended, with 6 enemy combatants maintaining overlapping fields of fire around a structure that provided excellent tactical advantages to its defenders. Marcus spent valuable minutes studying the position, looking for weaknesses that he could exploit without triggering a general alarm that would compromise the remaining hostages. The solution came from an unexpected direction. The enemy forces were using the building's structural advantages for defense, but that same architecture created blind spots that could be exploited by someone willing to take significant risks. Marcus's approach required a vertical descent that brought him down from directly above the enemy position, using rappelling techniques adapted for alien construction materials. The assault was swift and decisive, neutralizing 4 of the 6 guards before they could react effectively. The remaining 2 were taken alive after brief but intense close-quarters combat that showcased the effectiveness of his alien equipment against opponents using similar technology. But the second extraction revealed a problem that Marcus hadn't anticipated. The enemy forces were beginning to communicate more effectively, sharing information about his tactics and probable objectives. His element of surprise was eroding with each successful rescue, and the remaining hostages were undoubtedly being moved to more secure locations. Time was becoming critical. 20 minutes remained on his mission clock, and he still had 5 civilians to extract from increasingly well-defended positions. The tactical situation was evolving faster than his ability to adapt, and Marcus realized that he needed to change his entire approach to the problem. Instead of continuing with careful, methodical extractions, he decided to create a general distraction that would force the enemy forces to respond to multiple threats simultaneously. Using the explosive components of his equipment loadout, Marcus began a series of diversionary attacks against enemy positions that weren't directly related to hostage locations. The strategy worked better than he'd hoped, as explosions echoed through the urban environment, and enemy forces rushed to respond to apparent threats against their command structure. Marcus was able to move more freely through areas that had previously been heavily defended. The third and fourth hostages were extracted in rapid succession, both from locations that had been abandoned as their guards responded to his diversionary tactics. But the enemy forces were learning from each exchange, and their responses were becoming more sophisticated with each passing minute. With 15 minutes remaining, Marcus faced his most challenging extraction yet. The final 3 hostages had been consolidated into a single location, a fortified position that was clearly designed to serve as a final defensive stronghold. 8 enemy combatants, excellent defensive terrain, and multiple overlapping fields of fire that made any direct approach suicidal. But Marcus had one advantage that his opponents couldn't counter. He'd been here before, not in this specific scenario, but in situations that required exactly this kind of tactical thinking under extreme pressure. The final assault would require everything he'd learned in more than a decade of special operations experience. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, using a combination of explosive diversions, electronic warfare against enemy communications, and direct assault techniques that maximize the effectiveness of his superior individual combat skills. The enemy forces fought with professional competence, but they were defending a position against an opponent who understood their tactical limitations better than they understood his capabilities. When the smoke cleared and the final enemy combatant had been neutralized, Marcus found himself standing in a secure compound with 3 terrified but unharmed civilians and 7 minutes remaining on his mission clock. The extraction route to the designated safe zone was clear, and his tactical display showed no remaining enemy forces between his current position and mission completion. As Marcus led the final group of hostages towards safety, he realized that something fundamental had changed during the course of the mission. He'd entered the scenario area as a human warrior, trying to prove himself worthy of alien recruitment. But he was completing it as something more complex, a strategic thinker who could adapt human military doctrine to challenges that no Earth-based training could have anticipated. The extraction zone materialized around them as they crossed the final checkpoint, returning Marcus and all 7 hostages to the arena complex's medical facility. Around them, alien medical personnel moved with practiced efficiency, treating the minor injuries and psychological stress that resulted from their voluntary participation in the scenario. Marcus stripped off his equipment and weapons, noting that the alien technology had performed flawlessly throughout the mission. The energy weapons, tactical displays, and communication systems had been intuitive enough for him to master quickly, while sophisticated enough to provide genuine advantages over Earth-based equipment. War Master SEK Thor was waiting for him in the debriefing chamber, accompanied by Zexai and several other figures that Marcus hadn't encountered before. Their expressions were unreadable, but the body language suggested a level of attention that hadn't been present during his previous arena appearances. Mission completion in 38 minutes, 43 seconds, SEK Thor announced. All primary objectives achieved, with minimal collateral damage and no civilian casualties. Enemy forces neutralized with acceptable efficiency, and tactical adaptation throughout the scenario showed exceptional strategic thinking under pressure. Marcus waited for the inevitable follow-up, knowing that success in the scenario had been only the beginning of whatever evaluation process governed Umbral Corps recruitment. Your performance has exceeded expectations in every measurable category, SEK Thor continued. Combat ability, tactical thinking, moral character under pressure, and adaptability to unfamiliar equipment and environments. The Corps would be honored to count you among our operatives. It was the offer Marcus had been expecting, but now that it came, he found himself hesitating. Joining the Umbral Corps would mean abandoning any hope of returning to Earth in the foreseeable future, accepting employment with an organization that operated outside any legal or moral framework he understood. But it would also mean access to galactic intelligence networks, advanced technology, and the kind of strategic information that Earth's military would desperately need in the coming years. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and humanity was entering it with pitifully inadequate preparation. What will be my first assignment, he asked. Intelligence gathering in the Rigel sector, Zexai answered. Corporate warfare between mining consortiums has created opportunities for profitable intervention. Standard duration is 6 months, with survival rates significantly higher than arena combat. Marcus considered the offer carefully, weighing personal survival against strategic advantage for his species. The decision would define not just his own future, but potentially humanity's role in galactic politics for generations to come. I accept, he said finally, but I have conditions. SEK Thor's scales shifted to what might have been amusement. Bold. What conditions? Regular intelligence reports to Earth through whatever communication channels you consider secure. Nothing that compromises operational security, but strategic information about galactic politics and military capabilities. Humanity needs to understand what we're dealing with out here. Acceptable, SEK Thor agreed after a moment's consideration. Your species' ignorance serves no useful purpose, and educated allies are more valuable than ignorant enemies. Any other requests? Marcus thought of the knife that had carried him through 2 arena victories, the simple human weapon that had served him so well among alien marvels. I keep my knife. Of course. A warrior's weapons are sacred, regardless of their origin or sophistication. As Marcus shook hands with the War Master, using the human gesture to seal an agreement that would reshape his entire future, he realized that he'd accomplished something unprecedented in the arena's history. He hadn't just survived his trials by combat. He'd used them to secure humanity's first strategic intelligence asset in galactic space. The arena had been designed to test warriors and recruit the galaxy's most capable operatives. But it had never faced someone trained in the specific combination of individual combat skills and strategic thinking that defined Earth's elite military units. Marcus Kane, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs, had entered the arena as a prisoner marked for execution. He was leaving it as something far more dangerous to the established galactic order, humanity's first ambassador to the shadows that moved between the stars. Outside the complex's windows, Alien starships moved through traffic patterns that connected hundreds of worlds in a web of commerce, politics, and military power that Earth barely comprehended. But now, for the first time, humanity would have eyes and ears in those shadows. The real mission was just beginning.